Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we're playing the Jurisdictional command of Tunguska versus the Shasvastii Expeditionary Force, and the scenario is Biotechvore. Firstly, big thanks to channel supporter Galligan for being an enabler for this particular battle report. I've been wanting to play Biotechvore for some time on the channel, and they asked for a battle report not just about Biotechvore, but also explaining how to make things like drop troops and infiltrators work, which we'll cover in some detail when we get to the Shasvastii list for this game. Now, I'm playing Tunguska for this game, not because they're necessarily exceptional in Biotechvore, although they're very capable, but because it's just been ages since I've played Tunguska, and since then, not necessarily they've had tons of releases, but they've had some interesting new releases that really make a big difference for the faction. In particular, the entire Zellenkrieger suite, Extreme Zellenkriegers, Regular Zellenkriegers, and Den McConnelly, all of which are just not just great troops in their own merit, they're very solid, little expensive for warbands in that role, but that doesn't matter, you get what you pay for, and what you get is great quality, irregular/regular, impetuous, smoke-throwing psychopaths. And that is a niche that was thoroughly missing in Tunguska. They were the only nomad force that didn't have access to some kind of solid quality smoke. And its inclusion, look, I'm a simple man. These are the kind of things that I like. They're in Tunguska now. I've wanted to play Tunguska for a while. And there are a ton of other things in Tunguska that I like as well, so that's fantastic. What we're running here is a Puppet Master, not because Puppet Master, look, Puppet Master is not a fantastic unit in Biotechvore. I just like Puppet Masters, so we've got one in there, and counterintelligence is worthwhile in this scenario. It's bringing along two Puppet Bots, one Forward Observer boarding shotgun, one BS attack shock. We then have an Interventor Lieutenant, Interventor KHD, Rounder Red Fury, Securitate Paramedic, and Grenza Marksmanship. This is a no composition bonus, but this is a 5-person core. Now, would I normally run this? It's playable. It's very playable. It's got two high-quality marksmanship shooters. Both the Rounder and the Grenza are MSV marksmanship, and that means that you just absolutely go to town in terms of your gunfighting, provided you're willing to do your gunfighting with single wound models. They don't benefit hugely from being in a 5-person core link, it's really just +1 ballistic skill, but this is Biotechvore, and you've got to build lists for Biotechvore, and that means a 5-person core just efficiently moving out of my deployment zone was something that I really wanted. We then have 4 irregular troops, all Impetuous Irregular. I will be deploying the Bounty Hunter Impetuous. These models can all get out of the zone under their own power, because they can deploy on the deployment zone line, Impetuous forward, and then activate with their irregulars and get forward again. If for any reason I wasn't able to do that, say for example some of them had to throw smoke, then I would be able to coordinate the 4 of them if I felt like I really needed to. But the basic plan was just that they would get clear under their own weight. In the second combat group, we then have the Salamander, Den McConnelly, 2 Transductazons, and a Salute, not an Evo hacker, just a regular Salute, whose plan is to die. In its Biotechvore, it is possible to build lists that can get all of them can get entirely out of the zone, but in this particular case, that Salute is just marked for death. It is there just to give me 1 extra regular order on the first turn, because I am probably going to be attempting to coordinate these 4 models clear, because Transductazons at 6/6 move can get clear by themselves, and Den McConnelly, if you give him an extra movement through coordination or whatever, he's a regular order himself, his Impetuous will help him get clear as well. So this list has got a good, strong, clean plan for getting out of the biotech zone into the middle of the field, and then having a big scrap there and doing a bunch of classifieds, which is what Biotechvore is all about. Biotechvore, incidentally, just while I'm talking about it, is probably the most maligned scenario in Infinity. It's one of those, like, it's a meme scenario that if someone proposed it as a homebrew, they would get yelled at. But it's in the official scenario pack, and I actually really like it. I have literally I've never had a bad game of Biotechvore. Not only that, I've never had a game of Biotechvore that I didn't have great fun in. I think people dislike it because it forces you to do things that normally would be terrible ideas in Infinity. Biotechvore forces you to run your entire army into the midfield rather than just carefully extending individual pieces to accomplish specific goals. Biotechvore says, no, everyone gets in the midfield and has a big scrap there, desperately trying to accomplish classifieds. You're always working on an order budget. It is never comfortable. Like, you never have comfortable order pools in Biotechvore. I love it. I think it's a fantastic test of, like, player creativity and the ability to adapt to circumstances that you're conditioned to think are otherwise undesirable. I think it's a fantastic scenario. Maybe not for competition play, but frankly for competition play. If the rest of the scenario packet isn't hugely demanding, there is nothing wrong with telling players, write 1 list for Biotechvore and 1 list for everything else, and let's do this. I love this scenario. I think it's terribly maligned. I think it is fantastic. I've been looking to play it for ages. Now, playing against me, we have a Shasvastii list. I would say semi-optimized for scenario. This is local Shasvastii and Onyx player Owen, who basically was just keen to have a game. He wanted to pick up a book from me. I'm like, yep, 100%. Come around, we'll have a game of Infinity. I want to play Biotechvore. He had actually spent most of the day writing terrible Onyx Contact Force lists, trying to make double overdrawn work in Biotechvore. Don't do that, probably. Doesn't really matter. Couldn't quite figure it out, so he literally rocked up to my place and said, I'm just going to write a list now, it'll be fine, we'll see what I've got. And this is actually not a terrible list for Biotechvore. It's using some of the same principles as I did. So we've got this 5-person link, which will be able to get out of the zone comfortably under its own power. Then we have just a bunch of tiger creatures, which same deal, they can get out of the zone under their own power. They're going to be a little bit less effective, even though they're very, very fast, which is good. Because this is Shasvastii, there's no smoke, which means that if I'm able to pin them down, if I go first or whatever the situation is, they don't have a way to like mutually throw smoke to support their own advances. So they can kind of get caught in the open a little bit, but they nevertheless are very fast, irregular, impetuous, great for this scenario. And then we have a bunch of forward deploying slash impersonating slash infiltrating models. Now, these were pieces that Owen basically put in the list because he thought that was cool and wanted to use, and they basically are fine and certainly very annoying. But I think you can take this approach, but configure this a little bit better. So this is where I want to talk about drop troops and infiltrators and similar in Biotechvore, because confused deployment makes it look like you shouldn't use those models. Now, drop troops, I think you want to be very careful with. The penalty for drop troops landing on a neg3, even if you bring in an Evo hacker, the Evo hacker gives you an extra order. Evo hackers are very difficult to get clear of the zone in Biotechvore, unless you're playing Combined Army and have a 6-4 Evo, or like Scylla, for example. There are very, very few Evo hackers that can comfortably be played in this scenario despite the extra order. And drop troops, because they don't generate orders until they are deployed and they use their order to deploy, generally, I'd be cautious of drop troops. You might consider including one if you're willing to roll the dice on it, but I would be cautious with it. Infiltrators, however, I think actually are underrated in this scenario. And that's because, yes, you have to roll, but the payoff for succeeding an infiltration roll is massive, because typically what that will give you is a regular trooper in the midfield who has made it to safety, is able to interfere with the enemy advance, and is not requiring orders spent to get them clear of the Biotechvore zone if you go first. So even if you just take a bunch of models that need to roll like 9s or 10s, half of them will fail, but the half that succeed will be a huge advantage. And I can and have, like Ariadna, for example, how I play this scenario as Ariadna has a ton of Phys 13 infiltrators just getting into the midfield, just getting there, spreading out, generating those orders for me so that the other models can move forward using regular or impetuous, etc. And Shasvastii can actually apply the same situation with a couple of interesting kickers. So with Shasvastii, because they have all of the regeneration actually has some really clean interactions with Biotechvore as a scenario, which we'll see this game. But basically, if you die to Biotechvore, you won't attempt to regenerate until your opponent's next states phase, which means that you'll have gone prone somewhere, safe, right, having bugs nibble on you, whatever. You don't regenerate, so regeneration happens in the states phase, which is before the end of turn step when Biotechvore damage happens. So you can, sure, yep, if you've left a model in your DZ, it gets eaten by bugs. In your opponent's states phase, it will then attempt to regenerate, which means it will be available to you when your turn begins. If it passes its regeneration roll, it's not a bad insurance net. Now, what Owen is running is a Malignos Killer Hacker, 2 Speculo Mine Layers, a Caliban Forward Observer, and Caliban Engineer. I would argue against the Caliban in particular in this case. I like Caliban generally. They're fantastic. This is like fine as an all-purpose list. But forward deployment +8, because Biotechvore has small deployment zones, forward deployment +8 is not getting you very far. You still have to move to get clear, which means that if the Caliban makes its roll and succeeds its movement, its forward deployment, it actually does, it's not free. All it's doing is getting you 1 extra order, because it'll move clear of the zone in 1 order rather than taking 2. That's not really good enough. I would replace these Caliban with like multiple shrouded, kind of the same. I think if you cut the Malignos and both Caliban, you can just put in a whole bunch of shrouded. And in that vein, here is an example of a list that's kind of doing that sort of stuff. So this is a sample list doing kind of the same thing. It's using the cheaper Shashkin. It's put in 4 Shrouded. So usually 3 of those, so 2 of those rather, will succeed. That's totally fine. The other 2 might die, they might not, whatever. The Shrouded will be really annoying to your opponent, and it uses all of the spare points to get 2 Noctifers. Noctifers are nightmarish in this scenario because the hard AROs in Biotechvore have higher payoff than they otherwise would. Like, Noctifers are already good. Your opponent will be doing things like bringing link teams and trying to move them. It's hunting season for Noctifers. But in addition, the presence of a Noctifer in this scenario, even if your opponent predicts that the Noctifer is coming and they play around it, that takes orders. And orders in this scenario just translate to casualties because it's usually going to be pretty tight for your opponent to actually get clear of the zone. So this is a sample list. Something like this is what Owen could have played, didn't run the other list, and it would work out just fine. So yeah, that's my basic theory of how I play infiltrators and drop troops in the scenario. Don't play drop troops. No faction. No faction is dependent on drop troops unless they're Yarn Yarns, and I guess you can play Yarn Yarns. That's fine. But no faction is thoroughly dependent on drop troops. There are factions that really use a lot of infiltrators. Infiltrators are secretly actually pretty good in Biotechvore. You can use them. Take the cheaper ones with higher fizz. Take them in numbers, and they actually will work quite well. So here's the table. With Whip 15, I won the Lieutenant role. I've elected to go first, mostly because I have counterintelligence. The go first, go second in Biotechvore is actually kind of tight, where you have interesting options in both cases. If you are confident in your ability to break out, particularly if you're confident in your ability to pin your opponent back a little bit, going second can be really, really good because your opponent is forced to move all of their stuff into the midfield, so you can absolutely pounce. With factions like Toha, for example, I'm pretty comfortable going second in Biotechvore because I've got good ARO pieces that won't die and will slow my opponent down, and then I can efficiently move into the midfield and just hit all of the stuff that they've put there. Particularly against Shasvastii, with Nomads, wasn't quite confident in that. I have a very visible lieutenant, for example. And importantly, in this particular case, my lieutenant was probably going to be required to deploy near my link team, which would already be doing things like attracting attention. So I'm just like, just go first, solve problems if you can, and so I did. So in terms of our deployment, what we've got is the Salamander has reserve dropped up here. We have the entire core link team deployed in and around this space. We have our extreme Zellenkrieger here. We have another Zellenkrieger and an MBH down behind this building. We have this second regular Zellenkrieger over here with the Puppet Master just behind them. Our 2 flash pulse bots here and here. The baggage bot is hanging out down underneath these stairs where it will survive literally never. It will die on the first turn. Salute, my good friend, you were dead. That's totally okay. And we have literally nothing in the midfield. The puppet bots have sort of deployed on these stairs, ready to move out. It was difficult to figure out where to put the puppet master because there were only so many places we could go. One thing I have done is the HVT is deployed further forward than it necessarily needs to be. It is deployed with the front of its base on the 16-inch line, which is basically a cheeky way of saying I put it there so I could functionally pre-measure where the biotech zone is, and that's legal. That's totally fine. You just measure to make sure that it's outside your deployment zone, and having done so, you can measure the 16 inches. It's just a useful trick, and Owen has done the exact same thing. So we have HVT here and HVT here, neatly telling us if you need a reference, these 2 models will tell you where the Biotechvore zone is. Now, one of the things that I did note as part of that measurement is that this space back here was not safe. It was quite a silhouette 3 or 2 model could not quite fit there without touching the zone, but these spaces back here behind this building was okay. So useful to know. That helped me plan my line of attack and set me up basically for my first turn. For Owen's part, he makes a whole bunch of impersonation and infiltration rolls, including as part of his reserve, and what he succeeds is, the first Speculo Mine Layer succeeds in deploying down here with her mine. The second one, as the reserve drop, tries to pin in the Salamander. The mine has to go all the way back here because of the Mine Layer change. It can't go anywhere that it would trigger on one of my models the moment that they activated. One of the 2 Calibans has succeeded, so it's here. The other one has failed, and the Malignos has failed, so it's sitting back there. So that is 3 out of 5 have succeeded, which is a good result. It's about what you expect, and it's put these models forward in an annoying position. Otherwise, we've got Taiga creatures just basically scattered around. They're all over the place. One of them is here. The Caliban that failed its role is down here behind this building. The Link team is spread out in this sort of position here. And that's basically the entire list. That's sort of everything. Owen's running 14 or 13 troopers in this case. So I kick off my first turn. Owen stripped orders from the Salamanders combat group, which I think is pretty reasonable, and we begin just with a massive impetuous rush. Den McConnelly, by the way. Den McConnelly was down here behind this building. So everything runs forward, just yeets forward as quickly as it possibly can. I had the impetuous troop set up so that if they needed to, like if I was worried about Noctifers, for example, they could throw smoke to block off lines of fire. But as soon as this mine layer speculo deployed, I knew that I was okay. There would be no Noctifers because this speculo is 1.5 SWC, this one's 1.5 SWC. This is heavy armored Sheshkin down here, who is 1.5 SWC. Owen should not have taken her. He should have just taken the regular lightly armored Sheshkin plus an extra tiger creature. Like, this was objectively a mistake. She's not a good profile. And then the Nox hacker meant that there was 5 SWC visible, so no Noctifer. So we just ran for it. Everything absolutely just chugged up the table and just moved at full speed. The Salamander did not attempt to. The plan for this Speculo Killer was to just not deal with it. It would be tomorrow's problem. Ideally, it will die in the biotech zone on Owen's turn. So the Salamander just jumped down and ran. I asked Owen if he wanted to ARO, but there were still puppets back here. He clearly didn't. So we just got free and clear for free, effectively. Now, we would take almost no offensive actions this turn. Everything was just running, but we would do a couple of things. So firstly, the rounder in this combat group, which has marksmanship and a MSV1 and a biometric visor, is a perfect model for unpicking speculo killers. So the Link team moved up here and the rounder moved into the room. Now, first thing I did was I sent the Extreme Zellenkrieger in because there was a mine in there, and the Extreme Zellenkrieger got deleted by the mine, which may be a little bit sad because one of the things about Zellenkriegers is that they have structure, not wounds. They are shock immune. You can recover them with engineers, like gizmo kits are fantastic. I just did not have any of those in this list, so that was a problem. He was down for good. That's a thing that mines will do occasionally. But then we sent the rounder in, and she took a couple of orders. I think it took one Discover, which she just made because biometric visor, then a Discover Shoot, which was inconclusive. We both crit, then a Discover Shoot, and I put the Speculo Killer down. And then we just pulled out and around this way, including getting the Grenzer up in this tower. The Salamander then yeeted forward, came around here, put down the Caliban, and then ran back, and so it would end up in this position here. So basically, with the Grenzer here and the Salamander here, we have a lot of ARO covering Owen's deployment zone. And the goal there is basically to kill tigers and make it difficult for him to move forward. Everything else basically just moved up in support of that. I only had so many orders. I was able to do that coordinated order that I planned with the Salamander, which helped get basically both of these models got clear. And Demna Connolly would get clear in the same coordinated order. And I had just enough orders left in the first combat group to also get the Puppet Master out and around, so she would nook down here, and the puppets would move up in this position. Now, we ended up, this is just a sample picture of what I'm talking about. We ended up with a bit of a fort kicker situation. This is normally kind of like, this is a terrible idea to have this kind of stuff happening in the midfield, where you have the motorized bounty hunter and a Zellenkrieger and the Salamander and just a puppet bot in the open. Connolly is down here. The Grenzer is up there. But this kind of stuff is forced in Biotechvore. And in the context of this scenario, this was the right play. And what it meant was that Owen now had to try and get out of his DZ with all of this shooting staring at, in particular, this space here and this space here and here. So some of the Tigers just went for it. They just made the run. This one stayed where it was. This one attempted the run and got shot down. This one made the run and actually dodged clear. And then this one was free and clear, so it got clear by itself. Owen then had to put the Grenzer down, and he was able to do so. So this tiger creature actually got out and around with a cautious move that got it clear. I had to have some awkward angles. And then it moved up and it dodged, and it got on the... actually got to here, and Connolly dodged into CC with it. So at that point, Owen just left it in combat. But he had another one here that had made it around, to here. So it doubled back, cautious moving, staying out of the Grenzer's line of fire, up and around, had to succeed a dodge, got around and then moved around and put the chain rifle over the Grenzer. Chain Colt. The Grenzer failed its dodge and went unconscious. That's a thing that will happen. It happens to every Grenzer I've ever seen. The Salamander put the tiger creature down, but that put the Grenzer down. And with the Grenzer down, there was now only one gun watching this space here, which opened up the Link team basically to get free. Now, this took a bunch of movement and 2 cautious moves, but Owen was able to get the entire Link team out and around this way into this position here, at which point he engaged and destroyed the Flash Pulse bot that had made it up to this location and just hunkered down. So in terms of casualties, Owen has only killed, like, I think the 1-2 things of mine. That's more than I killed in his turn, but the Biotechvore zone kicks in because he's left some things behind. Oh yeah, this Caliban got clear as well. And it puts the... one more thing happened this turn, sorry. But the Biotechvore zone does put down the Malignos over here, and the Caliban over here is dead. So it just puts down the Malignos, and it puts down this Speculo Killer. So what happened with this Speculo Killer? Well, once Owen put the Grenzer down, he realized that the Speculo Killer was not going to have orders to get clear. So she was going to take wounds anyway from the Biotechvore zone. So he stood her up and he fired all of his shots into the paramedic securitate that was sitting down here and put her unconscious, which meant that I was not able to recover the Grenzer. Now, I shot back, I wounded her with, I think, a long-range boarding shotgun hit from the Interventor KHD. She went unconscious. Then in the states phase, she regenerated. Then in the Biotechvore end of turn phase, she went unconscious again, but she was not dead. So that means Owen has put down the Grenzer for good, as well as inflicting basically a couple of casualties, which is broadly a fine first turn. And he set his link team up in this position here, which is diametrically opposite from my center of strength, so they are actually going to be fairly safe. So I kick my second turn off, and we can see some of the casualties that have mounted. There's the downed Zellenkrieger, there's a downed paramedic over here. This is the Shashkin shot this thing to unconsciousness. This turn I just go ahead and attempt to accomplish as many classifieds as I can, and the link team is well suited to it. I will flub some rolls, it will take one more turn to do everything, but I'm able this turn to do the visor, the HVT with the rounder as she moves up and over to here. And then I make a decision. As part of those movements, I fling the Interventor Killer Hacker back into this position here, where I do the get into base contact with the enemy and make a whip +3 roll. I forget what it's called, but the Interventor ends up prone over here. Now, the reason why I'm willing to send the Interventor back into this zone is that Biotechvore is just damage 14, and the Interventor is BTS 9, and the Interventor will actually survive the turn in the Biotech zone. That is about all I'm able to accomplish. I do attempt to move. No, that's basically it. That's basically the whole turn. Oh, and the reason why it's the whole turn is remember that there was Dan McConnelly was in CC with a tiger creature. Yeah, it takes 4 orders for him to kill that tiger creature in close combat. He's firing his pistols, burst 2, so that's 8 dice rolls, and he takes 4 orders, 4 regular orders to put down that blasted tiger creature, which means that all the salamander can do is go into suppressive fire. Nevertheless, that's a fine first turn. Second turn, rather, I've done 2 of my 3 classifieds. I can do the next one next turn pretty easily, and even if I can't, I am securing the HVT. Unfortunately for me, Owen's link team here, all in snowy white, are able to do literally every classified that he has as well. So he moves up and around, he data scans this unconscious drone, which gets him 1. Then he coup de grace it. Then a tiger creature runs around here, gets into CC with, and coup de kills this other drone. It dies to the, or it gets, it doesn't actually die. There is a, back here, there is another Zellenkrieger which fails to kill it. We will kill it next turn. But that gets him 2 kills for Predator. And then the absolute mad lad picked up mapping in Biotechvore. Mapping is already one of the hardest classifiers to do in the game, and in Biotechvore it's nearly impossible, but he actually succeeds in getting his Shasvastii hacker all the way to here, maps this little bridge sign thing, and then gets all the way back, which means he's done 3 classifieds. Now, that's basically his entire turn, particularly getting the Shasvastii hacker back. But being able to do all 3 means that I had hoped to secure 3 classifieds and then be like, okay, cool, now I can play this conservatively. But the fact that I had to finish my last classified on my turn, and we had to basically sit there and do some math and figure out, like, how was this game actually looking? Now, I did have enough stuff left alive that it was going to be close, but probably in my favor. Dan McConnelly, who is hanging out over here, having killed that tiger creature, hucks around here just to chill out. Oh, by the way, this Malignos back here has been standing up and sitting down the entire game, thanks to Biotechvore and Regeneration. Dan McConnelly does net undermine, so I've done all 3 of my classifieds. And I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I've got more points left than Owen does, and I can afford to take some casualties. I've got like 219 points left at this point. So we get this Interventor clear of the zone, and all of my orders in Combat Group 1, basically it runs around here, it pops down a panda, a fast panda, kills the Nox hacker, and then runs back. And then I just use my remaining orders to have this Zellenkrieger impetuouses into and kills this tiger creature, and that's it. I've got like 2 orders left. The Zellenkrieger runs up around here, tries to engage, put a pulsar down over this guy, and just it dies. The Zellenkrieger dies, and the Nox is totally fine, and then we pass turn over to Owen. Owen does a bit of math. We sort of like figure things out. And basically at this juncture, to secure the win, Owen has to kill the salamander. And there's only one piece that can do that. It's the Malignos that has been standing up and sitting down the entire game. And so it goes for it, but it ultimately isn't going to make it. It attempts to camouflage, comes up and around here, gets discovered along the way. There's just slightly too many pieces in play. And because losing so we do some math here, losing the Malignos would cause Owen to drop down below the 150 point threshold, which means that he just calls uncle at that point and ends the game because he'd lose too many. If it dies, and it's going to die finishing this run, he'd lose too many points. So he knows when to call it. The game ends with both players having done all three classifieds, both players having over 151 points remaining, and I've just barely killed more points, or I've more than just barely, but I've killed more points than Owen has, which means it's a 7-5 win to Tunguska, but very close, just under that final tiebreaker, ending the game my way. An absolute cracking game. This has only been like a 25-minute video at this point. That's because Biotechvore plays fast. I love Biotechvore for that, like for so many reasons, and that's one of them. Biotechvore wraps up in good order. You get everything done. You have a story to tell at the end of it. Seriously recommend Biotechvore as a scenario. I won't play it like again soon, but it's a wonderful palate cleanser. It's a wonderful way of generating unique experiences. Hugely, hugely underrated scenario. Very fun, especially for casual play if you build a table for it. You have to, like, if you look at these deployment zones, by the way, see how all of these buildings are just a little further back than they might usually be? Yeah, because I want to be able to play Biotechvore on this table. You do have to build tables for Biotechvore because of the 8-inch deployment zone. But yeah, great scenario, great fun. Love playing with Owen. As always, he's a tremendous opponent and huge fun to play against. Big thanks again to Galligan for supporting the channel and requesting the scenario. On that note, as always, if you want to support the channel, you can do so via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member. We have a bunch of those people who have signed up. Huge thanks to everyone who does. I take requests for both topics, faction focuses, battle reports, armies to play, etc., from channel supporters via Buy Me a Coffee and channel members. As always, I hope very much that you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.